All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Friday Mastermind. Every Friday, 9 o'clock, we're bringing in amazing special guests. Sometimes we are bringing in top producing mortgage professionals. Sometimes we're bringing in top producing realtors. Sometimes it's authors. And then sometimes it's visionaries. It's industry entrepreneurs. Today, someone that is very data-driven, my favorite type of entrepreneur. We're going to bring in Mike in just a minute. But before I do that, Deborah, you were the one that first brought Mike into this community. Why don't, any topics you have, and why don't you also do a little bit of an intro, just because he's been here before, but I want people to hear why you think this is an important person to mastermind with right now.
Well, I think as, modern mortgage advisors who are always looking to seek and give value to our real estate partners, sometimes it's leading them and helping them understand the data or the market and finding the holes in their business. And it's just always been this, driver for me of how can we overgive. And to me, my secret weapon was always knowledge. Like, I consume content. A lot of you know this. I do it for fun. Like, even when I'm on the airplane, I just love to consume content and really try to understand what drives the market. What are some things that are left out of some of the charts that maybe we're overlooking, because, sometimes data can skew things if we don't look at all constants or variables. And so Mike was someone that I found on YouTube originally, where every week he would post just a national market update, and I would learn from him just live time. And that's what I love about Altos. And he has an ebook that we'll talk about, that if you download the ebook, which I believe is for free, it helps you understand the data. And so it's not dated from like a month ago trends, which is what a lot of the content that I was consuming was always, it was like delayed data. And with COVID, you can't have delayed data to make more informed decisions. So it's no surprise I found him through social. And just
Love it. So
yeah.
YouTube, and we'll put a link to that YouTube channel. It's one of the best YouTube channels in housing. It's valuable for realtors. It's valuable for mortgage professionals, and it's free. So make sure you check it out. Todd, anything you want to say to frame today's call?
Well, I think Deb just nailed it, right? The bottom line is this, right? You're all looking for reasons to make phone calls, right? Call reluctance is still a thing that we shouldn't be having right now. And I think when you have something to say, then it's easier to make calls. And Deborah would say it's easier to make posts on social media. And I think that when we have Mike here, who's going to arm us with that data, I just want you to be making notes of your talk points, right? What are the 1, 2, or 3 things that you can take out of this that can be a conversation that you can have with clients, a conversation you can have with real estate agents, and a conversation you can put out there on social. And I'm just fired up. It's always great, Mike, to have you here, because you always do such a great job of setting us up for success.
Great to be here, everybody.
All right. So before we bring Mike officially on stage and just ask him questions, remember, audience, some mastermind, put your questions in chat. We will get to it. The MBA annual starts this Sunday. I'll actually be flying into Denver, Colorado. I go to this event every year where it's all C-suite, executives, the CEOs, the head of productions, the head of secondary, all the big investors are there, Fannie, Freddie. And I've never been more excited about an MBA. I mean, first of all, it's in Denver, my birthplace, and the home of the Denver Broncos. So pretty pumped about just going to Denver this week. But guys, we've had 2 weeks of winter, or excuse me, 2 years of winter in the mortgage industry, and we are in a new market cycle. The Fed, lowered the discount rate. Exactly what that means, I'm going to show my mobile phone. I just want to remind folks, the Rate Watch app is available for all MortgageCoach members. If you click this little pie screen and you go down to the mortgage market, you can look at trends. And I don't think you guys all know this trend. This is what it looks like over the last 90 days in mortgage. We had rates start, come from down here all the way down here, and now they've started to come back up. The heartbeat of the mortgage industry has been a little tough. But here's what I believe. I believe that there's never been a clearer roadmap to be successful. Like I interview the best loan officers in America. I have the data of what modern mortgage professionals do versus what traditional loan officers do, and modern mortgage originators win. They're gaining market share. It's never been more clear. It's never been more obvious. And one of the things that we know that is a trait of a modern mortgage originator is they're hyper local. We know they use technology. We know they use data. And so we have someone here, in my opinion, that's very, very, very important. He's an innovator in the mortgage space. He's an innovator in the real estate space. He's taken what was typically just national data and he's aggregated it so that loan officers, realtors can log into a platform and they can get really valuable hyperlocal information. And so Mike, good to have you here, brother. What's your take? Like you just heard my take on how important it is to be modern, how important it is to be local. How do you advocate being modern and being local when you're on stage? I mean, you're speaking to companies all the time. How do you put that in your words?
I think everybody knows that we want to bring value to the end customer, the home buyer and seller. And one of the easiest ways to think about it is like in real estate, there's only three questions. It's like, what's for sale? How much is my house worth? And how's the market? Right? Is it a good time? Are there a lot? Do I have a low ball? What's going to happen here? And so those how's the market questions are what, like, you're at the barbecue and somebody goes, oh, you're doing mortgages? How's the market? Right? Like that's the question on people's minds. And when you can answer that with a real number that's not just vibes, right? Like that is like, well, like we saw 20% more home sales last month than the month before because rates ticked down, right? Or we saw, there's only 14 houses for sale in the whole town. Like using the data in the conversation is what immediately demonstrates the value, right? And so it's in the conversation, in the casual conversation, but it's also in the script when you're, when you're actually doing prospecting calls and so you can work the data into the conversation when you're doing real direct prospecting calls as well. And I think you just shared, Deborah just shared the link to the ebook. And in that ebook, it's a free ebook. It's how to use market data in your business. And if anybody has seen me talk or watched our Altos videos, seen me talk about how I talk about the data and what's happening, that book has things like scripts and it has the descriptions about, when to use it and what does median days on market mean? And how do we answer these questions so we can be confident and you don't have to be universal with the data. You just you have some things ready.
Love that. A couple things I want to add to that while people are listening to this. And I agree 100% with the questions that people have. But I also think they also have the question of what are interest rates today and what is my payment today? They have the question of what will they be? What do you think is happening? And then the question that most of them don't ask, but they should all be asking is what is my net worth going to look like, or what's my equity position most likely going to look like in this neighborhood or this market 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and look and make choices based off of vision casting net worth over time. And by the way, Ron, we did share a link to that ebook. It's just right above your little chat. Click on that. Deborah shared it, and we will share it again. But Todd, anything you want to either ask or add to that in terms of the questions and what Mike said?
It's so hard the how's the market question, right? Because that's just one of the ones that we always talk about with Phil Jones and exactly what to say. Because ultimately we know it's a junk question, right? And so it does give the opportunity to ask for a little more specificity to try to figure out whether it's someone who's truly actually thinking about buying or selling or refinancing or investing in the market. Versus somebody who is just trying to make small talk. I was at my nephew's football game last night, bumped into someone I knew from my bike racing days, from when I owned my bicycle store in my previous life. And that was the kind of conversation that he and I had. And so I always love, catching up with people. So there's definitely some of you, we're overdue to catch up. But But I do like that, Mike. I mean, how detailed do you think people should get when they ask, how's the market? Are you saying that we should total nerd out with your data? Or are you saying that we should just try to pique their interest? Or what's your thought?
Well, so when you get that first question, that how's the market question, there is my take is like you start with an answer, and it's not, the answer is not like you know, it's always a good time to buy or sell a house, right? Like that's not that, that's not, but you start with an answer that is like, well, rates came down this month and we could see sales pick up. Like or we could see inventory is actually is on the rise. There's more selection for buyers now than there was. Like a simple, direct answer to the question is great. And then you go into the, like, tell me about what you're thinking, right? And because even if it's I'm not actually buying a house now, if Todd has given me some actual value in that opportunity when I asked him, now when it's time to go buy a house in a year, I remember Todd knows what he's talking about. And so having just a little bit of answer to that. The other way that, though, like that, even if they don't ask that question, it's on everybody's mind, right? If I'm thinking about the, like if I'm thinking about maybe buying in the next year, or at some point we're going to have to upgrade and get 2 more bedrooms, or, like I'm thinking about those things, then the opportunity is to go like, and if you're sitting down doing a consultation, the opportunity is to say, are you a big geek or a little geek? Because if you're a big geek, I'm going to put this report in your inbox every Monday, and it's got all kinds of data and you can watch all the things. Look, if you're just a little geek, I want you to look at one number. Just watch this one number. If this number is falling, it means as a buyer, you're going to have more opportunity. And so it may be time to take action. So you can like, it's always good. You get asked a question. It's always great to follow up with another question. And the other question is like, are you a big geek or a little geek? And that's a great way to position that, like, because I'm going to follow up with real data. And that's how I think those are very powerful ways to transition into like, I have the value, I'm an expert, and here's what you want to, here's how I can help you use that.
I think also with that, it's using your data to debunk these stories that, the average consumer may create in their mind of like, maybe I should wait to buy after the election. And, even talking about supply and demand, like maybe home prices will crash, or this is very similar to 2008. And so when you can look at the patterns and use the data to see, okay, it doesn't look like demand is going to go, crashing at any point. Like nothing in the data would reveal that, there's going to be a flood of foreclosures or so. So that's how I look at how do we use the data, even from a social media standpoint, to debunk some of the stories we tell ourselves that could prevent us from buying sooner. And, to your point, Dave, accumulating wealth quicker, faster. It's like too many people are sitting on the sideline just waiting and hoping with data that wouldn't support that prices are going to come down or there's going to be a flood of like good deals coming to the market.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of stories out there. There's a lot of people who are sitting on the sidelines waiting for prices to crash, and I'm just going to swoop in and get a good deal. It's been really fascinating over the last 2.5 years. Sales have come way down, but home prices have not, with a few local market exceptions, but generally across the country, home prices have not fallen. And so, how long are you going to wait? How long are you going to wait for those bargains? And so, and a lot of times, when I publish stuff, especially on social media, there are folks who they assume that home prices are already crashing. And so the way I like to answer that question or that comment for them is I say, look, they might, but let me show you, there's no evidence in the data now of home prices crashing. And so, and then we can talk about why that is. And, we can dive into all those details, but there's a lot of folks who have those expectations out there. And it's, I think my approach is to say, like those it may be happening, like maybe will happen in the future, but as of right now, there's no evidence anywhere in the data of things like a home price crash.
So let's do this. We're 15 minutes in. I feel like we've really set up this topic. I want to close in the last 15 minutes around how can people tactically be a hyper local modern mortgage advisor. So everybody be, Deborah, be thinking about what you want to net out in the last 15 minutes to make it actionable. I will definitely guys, here from what I've heard in this conversation for the next 30 minutes, here are some very tactical next steps to take. But why don't you do this? Assume, everybody on this call, first of all, there's some of the most highly successful top 1% modern mortgage advisors on this call. And then there's a lot of people that want to be, modern. They're looking to upgrade. Why don't you give us a briefing, because you've got data. I would love to know at some point within your briefing what's going on in Denver, just because I'm going to Denver. I'm going to be by the way, when you're traveling someplace, I want to be smarter about what's happening in the Denver market than people that live in the Denver market when I'm in Denver next week. So why don't you kind of give us an update and just make sure I know what's going on in Denver next week?
Sure. So, the interesting thing, let's start with a national view,
Yeah,
and then we could dive
yeah.
into Denver. So there are,
And feel free to share your slides or your
okay.
desktop
Yeah. Let me
anytime
just
you
do a
want.
quick slide share, and I'll just start with a national view here. Share. So there are 739,000 single family homes unsold on the market across the country. It's been, each line in this chart is a year, and inventory peaks late in the year and then curves down for the holidays. 2024 is right in the middle there. You have the cluster of years above. Those were the pre-pandemic years, last decade. The cluster of lines down at the bottom, these are during the pandemic when we're buying every home in sight. So, in 2021, there are more homes in contract at any given moment than were on the market available to buy. And so that was really unusual. So one of the questions for next year is are we going to get back to the old normal levels of inventory? Right now, there's 33% more homes unsold on the market now than a year ago, but it's still 25% fewer than it used to be. So it's still nationally, inventory is very tight. Across the Sun Belt states, the Floridas and Texas and Arizona and things, a lot of those markets are at their old normal levels. So the 2019 levels of inventory, like a place like Dallas and Austin have more inventory than they've had in like 10 years. So these are big construction markets that have benefited over the last 10 or 15 years with a lot of inbound migration, people moving from the Midwest to Texas. And what's happened in the last 2 years is what I call the great stay. It's like we are staying in our houses longer. We're staying in our jobs longer, that we're staying in our towns longer. So the inbound flow of people moving into Dallas and Austin and Florida and those markets has slowed way down. And so inventory is building in the Sun Belt, and it's still really low in the Midwest and the Northeast, barely higher than some of these pandemic lows. So just now growing in, Chicago and, the Rhode Island and Boston are just barely coming off. And what that means is earlier in the year is why Boston was like the hottest market in the country, right? Inventory was tight. People who used to be moving to Florida stopped moving to Florida for a little while. And so if you're buying in Boston, your selection was super low. So we have a very bifurcated market right now. The Sun Belt states have a lot more inventory, and therefore price changes are weaker. Home prices they're up a few percent nationally. Home prices are up a few percent nationally. And I'll zip off to a price chart in a few minutes. But you know, they are in a couple of key markets. They're down from the peak in 2022, but home prices in general across the country are up about 1.35% across the country right now. So nationally, what we're looking at for next year is that's going to moderate a bit. So the Northeast markets will continue to grow, and the Sun Belt markets will not grow as much. So we'll get a little bit of more evening out over the next year. And so it'll be a little more, we'll see slightly more home sales. You know, we were going from like the NAR announced yesterday, I think it was yesterday, and super low home sales. Like the headlines were like lowest in 15 or 18 years or something like that. And we can see that if rates inch down closer to 6 for most of the year, we can see the sales ticking up in that time. One of the questions Deborah mentioned was like, there are folks out there who are assuming we're going to have a big flood of sellers, and we're going to have so many sellers, and that's going to drive home prices lower. The bargains are going to come up. And one way to watch for that trend is to track the weekly new listings. So this week there were 60,000 new listings unsold across the country. That's single family homes. And in this, each line is a year. And so you could see the red line for this year, and the gray lines are previous years. And you can see normally in this part of October, you might have 70 or 80,000 new listings in a given week. And we had 60,000. And so we have 60,000 because we know that folks have their good mortgages, they're not changing jobs. Like all of these things are keeping people in place to preventing them from selling. And so what we have is slightly more sellers than last year, like 8% more sellers than last year. And so next year, hopefully we grow that again, 5 or 8%. But in the big bearish scenarios, the crisis scenarios, the new listings line would have to climb above these old gray lines. In other words, you'd have to start seeing more sellers than we used to have. That's what would get a lot more inventory to build up. And then you get a supply demand imbalance. So, but there's no evidence of any real growth in sellers this year.
So Mike, with this chart, does anything with what happened with Florida and the hurricanes, like?
Yeah. So that it did, in fact. So Tampa, Sarasota, Western Florida, there's a lot of people. Those are pretty big markets. And the new listings dropped off by like half in those metros. The available inventory, a lot of withdrawn properties. So the number of sellers has dropped pretty dramatically, and that's enough to nudge the national numbers down overall. When we're looking at this in the last week, it's a little downturn in the last week of 2024. In those Western Florida markets, I think if you look at further south, like Naples, so that was a year ago when it was Hurricane Ian, I think. And so the inventory dropped initially there, but then about a year later, you have folks who are like, maybe it's time to get out of, like, unload or get out of this place. Insurance costs are way up. So I could imagine that next year at this time, maybe we start to see a bigger inventory in some of those Western Florida markets. People who are like, you know, my insurance cost keeps going up. You know, we got wiped out again, whatever the things are. I could imagine that growth in inventory is like another year out. And so if you're in those markets, you got people who are worried about that. And so what do we want to tell them? Well, you want to say, I'm going to put the report in your inbox and we can watch the new listings each week. We can track how many people are listing each week. We can track the total inventory. We can watch price reductions in those markets so to see if there's any buyers or how weak that is. And so, look, if you're thinking about selling sometime in the next year, the first thing you want to do is make sure you're tracking the market data so that when it's time to pull the trigger, you know what's ready to go. And by the way, that comes from me. This is the Mike Market Report, so that you'll know to call me when it's time to do that work.
So, so Mike, well, no, keep going through your charts and let me know when you're done with kind of the macro, and then I have a question.
Okay. Well, the other thing that I did this week was I am interested in, so we know at the new listing level, there are nationally pretty tight sellers. We also know that there are some markets where there are more sellers. And so the question is like, do hurricanes cause a flood of sellers? Are people afraid in Dallas? Like, are investors unloading, or are there those kind of things that would drive inventory higher? And so what I did was we took the 100 biggest metro markets around the country. Dallas has, in terms of number of homes for sale, Dallas is the biggest market in the country. And the new listings each week is the most new listings. So Dallas has 12% more sellers right now than they did in 2019 and new listings each week. So slightly more sellers, but there's a lot of the country. Chicago has 36% fewer sellers in a given week than they did in 2019. There are 3 markets that maybe have a lot more sellers. It's like Spartanburg, South Carolina. It's Huntsville, Alabama. And what was the third one? That was another Sunbelt one off the top of my head. I can't think of it. But, in Spartanburg, we build a ton of homes. They've got a big inbound, migration. They've got like car manufacturing. And so that is a big growth market. And so there's a lot more homes on there than there used to be. But there's really only 3 markets that have a lot more sellers than there used to be. So, I'm looking for canaries in the coal mine. Is San Antonio or Austin leading the market change? As of right now, the trends look like, we have slightly more sellers. It's going to be a slightly more robust market. If we get lucky, rates tick down, we're going to have slightly more sales. Those are the pieces that are coming into place for 2025. You had a question, Dave?
Where like if you were a loan officer and wait a minute, not loan officer, a modern mortgage advisor, and you're whether it's a one-on-one meeting with an agent or whether it's a lunch and learn with a small group. Let's not like do a big audience, very small group, we're very local. How would you balance the briefing of macro versus micro? Like right now you've kind of gone macro with us, macro market country. How much time would you spend with that? And then how much of it would go, okay, now let's look at it locally. How would you divide that time, or how would you coach uh, a modern mortgage advisor on
So
that?
I would coach to like I like to start with the national trends because everybody is familiar with the national trends.
Yeah, it's in the news.
It's in the
mainstream
news, right?
media. Yeah. So you want to be the
And
news.
and no matter, it almost doesn't matter. It's like where you get your news, you may have a totally different story about what's happening in the market. You may think everything's crashing. You may think everything's fine. Like but everybody has a story, a national story. So, I like discussing inventory trends. How many sellers are there? I like, price trends are very easy. And I like using the percentage of homes on the market with price reductions as a leading indicator for future sales. So we know that, about a third of homes when they get listed for sale are going to take a price cut because they were overpriced. So when it's 40% or 45, like that's a slow market because those people, some people got surprised and more people got surprised and had to do a price cut. So I like to use those 3 can be really great numbers.
So really 3 slides. And by the way, guys, in case you haven't figured this out, you are getting a playbook from today that you can go and be a badass, a modern mortgage, data-driven modern mortgage advisor. You could take this call. You could, Mike's given us, by the way, are you going to give us these national slides or do we need to get screenshots?
I can, happy to give the slides if you want to, yeah, happy to send them.
Who wants the slides? Depending on how many people give us a reaction, either a heart or a thumbs up. If we get enough, come on, that's
Go
not
ahead.
enough.
I'm
I don't
looking.
know. I don't know. Okay. Okay. We'll get the slides. If you're watching this in YouTube, there'll be a link to the slides down below. There'll also be a link to Mike's ebook, which is mind blowing. I've read it. I've looked at it. I haven't studied it. I just got it, but I've already scanned it and it's money. Okay, cool. So how much total talk time? Like if let's do like a TED talk. We got less than 18 minutes.
Yep.
How much time on national versus local? If
So-
you were given that opportunity.
Yeah. So if we're doing a small group in like in Denver, I would do, you know, first 3 or 4 minutes at the national level. And
So
then,
less than 5 minutes.
yep,
And
less
then
than 5 minutes.
And now let's put you on the spot. Let's go local. Let's go Denver.
Yeah. So, okay, let's go Denver. Right. I'm gonna
And
see
log
this.
in. And guys, you're also getting a little demo of the platform.
Yes.
Like
Let me
this
grab
is what
a Denver
people
report real
that
quick.
are subscribing to Altus Research, part of the Housing Wire network. And if you are not a Housing Wire subscriber and reader, I can't recommend it enough. They have some free content. They have some premium content. I am a premium member of Housing Wire. Can't recommend it enough. Okay, so this is
So I
this is
pulled
what
up
people
the
got.
Denver Metro report.
All right.
And in fact, we can dive into zip codes or city level stuff, but just for the conversation, we'll do the Denver Metro report. And you know, that big geek or little geek conversation, right? If you're just a little geek, you're like, I'm going to put this market report in your inbox and I want you to watch this one number, right? This market action index, this is like a speedometer. This is supply versus demand. If supply is picking up and buyers are not, this little speedometer is going to tick lower. If you're waiting for buyer opportunity, watch this number. If we have your house listed, watch this number. But if you're a big geek, well, now we can go dive into all kinds of things with the data and look over time. So let's look
So it's just a slightly seller's market right now.
just slightly. Yes. Because,
Wow.
and in fact, not a buyer's market because there is still sufficiently tight inventory, you know, that like, it's funny, but across the country, we haven't seen a buyer's market in, you know, 17 years, right? Like it's been a long time. You know, it's been, the last decade was a really strong time, right? Inventory has been falling all, you know, since like 2012. It's all of those things are in place. But let's look at the long trend. So the 5-year trend in home prices in the Denver metro. Obviously, pre-pandemic, we had a big run up. In fact, let me just pull this one off here. I'll do this guy. And we can see that then since 22, we've had basically flat home prices. Here's the 3-year summer cycles. And right now, the median price of single family homes in the Denver metro is 700 grand. It's down a little bit from a year ago, and just up slightly from 2 years ago. So you could see that tight band. Now I'm interested in, let's look at the inventory trends. So we've been talking about inventory trends here, and I can look at, so Denver, there are more homes on the market now in Denver than there have been in the last 5 years, right? Buyer selection
Wow.
is improving.
I did not know that.
Right. And we can go in the Altos platform, you can actually go back longer history, but in the reports that I've got up here, so that's a notable thing. And when I'm looking at, for example, that new listings rate, if we have a combination of the high inventory and new sellers coming in, that would be a scenario, right? Like, do you want to get ahead of this curve, or is it now's the time to start doing your shopping because your opportunity is increasing here? Like those are valuable ways to position the data. You can also see, though, that this time of year is right at peak inventory. Usually starts falling by now. And last year, because rates were really climbing into the eights, inventory didn't peak in Denver until the end of November. And so, we could see that could actually, because rates are on the way up the last few weeks, like maybe we'll have a few more weeks of climbing inventory in Denver before declining in the fall. It's not, though. You can see we've had the curve, right? It's not going to the moon here. Like, we can see the inventory curve here. We have a seasonal peak. Like, we're gonna drop down. Like, this is normal seasonal activity all the way through. You can see exactly how inventory happens in Denver. There were 6,000 homes on the market, 5,900 homes. Now there's 6,900 homes, so a little more homes for sale in Denver than 5 years ago, but not dramatically more. So, and in fact, in like Phoenix, for example, there's like 70% more homes on the market now than a year ago. So those are like a compelling thing to pay attention to. Here's another thing that I like. In the Altos reports, in every market, every zip, every metro in the country, we dive into 4 price range segments. The high end of the market may be behaving differently from the low end. And so, when you're sitting down with a home buyer and they're like, well, Denver, there's more inventory, everything's on the market longer. But then you look at the price range as well. Anything over $1 million is, taking 2 or 3 months to sell. But look at this. Anything under $1 million is still moving pretty quickly, 49 days on market. So, it's slower than it was during the pandemic, but it's not that slow, right? So, you sit down with a home buyer and they're like, well, the market's slow, and you go, but in your price range, like, you're buying at 650 in Denver, that's the highest competition price point in Denver. If you want to make the house, you want to get this house, you need to make a real offer, right? You don't want to lowball this just because you think the market's slow. So that price range segment is very powerful. It's also a way where you get to do things like, well, maybe I'm interested in expanding the house, investing, fix and flip. And then you go like, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to buy an $800,000 house and add a bedroom and get it up into $1.4 million because those are bigger lots. But I can maybe buy, something that's 1,500 square feet and upgrade and get it to 2,100 square feet and move up the price range that way. And so you can see exactly where you're behaving. There's a lot of markets. So I really like, when I'm sitting with one-on-one or in small groups, like talking about the price range segment, and you can see exactly under 800 grand, under $1 million in Denver is still actually moving pretty quickly.
Yeah. One of the things we do at Trust Engine is we're able to help identify people that are most likely to move up. And it's a dual market opportunity. So one of the opportunities are, guys, is to find people that are in the high end of the low end, and which is more of it's going to score higher on the seller's market than the high end. And then when you're calling that person, we have data-driven ways of identifying who is most likely to move up right now. And when you call them, part of the story that you're telling is, and by the way, if you don't know this data, like, you can't have a super effective conversation, but when you have this data, you can have a highly effective conversation around, hey, your house is X, average days on the market is Y. You could sell at that. You can move up into, this market where the average day on the market is Y. So you could sell in a seller's market, and you can buy in, maybe it's a buyer's market. It's closer to being a buyer's market. But again, if you don't have this data, you aren't able to have that conversation in the most effective way possible. And trust me, folks, realtors want to work with loan officers that are modern mortgage advisors that can actually help them sell homes, help them get listings, help them sell homes, not loan officers that can just close a loan on time. That you need to be more than that in the market. Todd, any questions come to mind? Anything you want to say at this point?
Well, just a thought, right? I was in Denver this week teaching a room full of real estate agents, didn't exactly what to say role play. And it's fascinating when I see the data, right? Because I'm seeing this data in the rearview mirror, but there was folks in the room who said that they're having a better year this year than last year. Now, they also said that last year wasn't quite as good as 2022 was, but they're still having better 24 over 23, had agents in the room who were struggling in this market. And I think that's just the loan officer picture as well, right? And so, ultimately, when you have this type of data, like this data would have been a lot of fun for me to have. This is kind of what they were feeling. They were talking about inventory going up. And that's why we were discussing how to have better, more effective conversations with their clients. And so I just love this whole idea, Dave. I think you're right? The modern mortgage advisor needs to have data. They need to be data driven, and this needs to drive your conversations. And then going back kind of what Mike said about the quote unquote TED Talk, right? Yeah, you've got to know the national stuff because that's what they're hearing and reading about in whatever news source they have. But where you actually shine as being modern is when you have the local data. That's where you differentiate yourself. Like, hey, it's really great that you heard X online, but hey, here's Y in our market. And that's really how you all crush it. And so I promise you this, before I go back up there, because I'm going back up there to teach again in the first week of December, I'm going to be making sure I know better about the Denver market.
Yeah, I'll do a couple more things on Denver, a couple of really interesting things. So I mentioned price reductions, right? Percentage of homes on the market with price reductions. So houses on the market now, it doesn't get an offer. It does a price cut in November. It gets an offer in December that closes in January. You start hearing about it in February, right? But I can tell you right now, if I'm watching the price reductions, what's happening. And so this is the percentage of homes with price cuts in Denver Metro over the last 5 years. Here's what you can see. There are 52% of the homes on the market in Denver with price cuts. That's pretty high, right? It is, Denver is a market where it's normally around 40% of homes take a price cut. So 50% means more people are surprised, but it's fewer than 22. So in 22, we started off in ultra hot mode and the brakes went on. And so look at the price cuts that were accelerating every week in Denver in 22, right? When the market was going from 3% mortgage rates to 7.5%, these were everybody who was getting surprised. And so if we're here, like in April of 22, I started shouting to people like, if you have sellers, get them ahead of this curve because we can already watch that happening. And if you listed your house in, June of 22, you were way behind the curve. And so you wanted to do it at a discount already, not try to go fishing because that was really slow. Last year improved. So, a slower, less of a steep slope, fewer peak. This year was pretty good. And then in the last few weeks, because rates have climbed again, we're up over 52%. So,
Mike,
yes.
What about those who decide, forget it? Like, I don't have to sell.
Right.
I got a good rate. Instead of reducing the price, they just withdraw.
So that absolutely, that decreases the total number of homes on the market with price cuts. So, if that house isn't for sale, that means inventory is tighter. That means there's fewer sellers who are eager to sell, and that has impact for your buyers and the buyer scenario. So, for example, in Tampa, there were a lot of houses that had been sitting on the market with price cuts that are now not even listed. So there are a lot fewer homes for sale in Tampa. So that number is down in Tampa right now as well. And so if the price reductions number is falling, it's falling because people are buying homes, or it's falling and because they're withdrawing. It doesn't matter. In some ways, it doesn't matter because those houses aren't for sale. And so, I don't have to sell for a lower price, so I'm not going to sell a house. And so it watching that curve is very telling for the conditions for the buyers in the future. Let me show you one more, Dave. Let me show you and Todd one more stat. So I'm going to switch over to the Altos Advanced Analytics platform. So for Altos premium customers, where you've got at least a county of data, we have this advanced analytics platform where you can go dive in and build your own charts. And what I looked up was the pendings, the new count. So how many homes are going into contract each week in Denver? New pendings each week. And Todd, you mentioned that that this year for some of those folks was better than last year. And if you look at the transaction volume each week, here's what's happening, right? Started off, there's fewer transactions all year in Denver. And then in the last few months, so last year, rates were spiking July, August, September, October, and sales count was dropping. The green line, sales count was dropping. And so now there's slightly more sales happening each week in Denver than there were a year ago. So
Wow.
that is slightly, but then you mentioned 22, right? And there's still fewer sales than 22, obviously, and especially early 22, you know, when we were still coming out of the boom time. So, and I'm just pulling this up like as a, you know, as a discussion. If we're talking with realtors and you say, okay, what's fourth quarter going to look like? Like fourth quarter is going to be better than last year. Now rates have spiked, so that I imagine our transaction volume is going to dip at least in the next few weeks. But like we can see more transactions happening in the fourth quarter in Denver than we saw last year at this time. So, you know, thank God. but you could see that trend. And so Todd, when people said like it feels like it's up a little bit, like that's exactly what they were talking about. They're doing more deals.
Love it. Love it. The data proves them out.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I would think it's even better because there's fewer agents than there were, I believe. Is that correct? We have less.
Yes, there are fewer, and I think there's fewer loan officers too in that time.
So guys, you know, one assignment for everyone watching this is you've got to read this ebook. It's 42 pages. It walks through exactly, you know, the 3 big questions. Like literally what we did today, think of this as like teacher's notes. It also walks you through the different reports, the key metrics that you should be watching. If you're a modern mortgage advisor, you need to know this stuff. And then you need to be able to tailor it based off of who you're talking about. So I mean, go download this report. It's free. You know, it's got all the different signals and data that you should watch. I mean, like, guys, this is like a college class, like practically. And then yeah, at the very end, there's a couple options where one, you can run a report and there's actually a link, like it's built in, like it's got a link built into it. You can schedule a demo, learn more.
And you know, Dave, on that, you know, we talked Denver today. But if anybody wants to dive into their local market and like, how am I going to discuss this with my, you know, like do a review their local market and build it in their business, they could book that demo. It's free consult with our team. And like, how would I use this? How am I going to go take this to my realtors? What am I going to say? What's the market looking like? We can do all that stuff and like, just click that schedule a demo button right there.
Well, my favorite thing about that is I love when selling and marketing come together and they create tangible value. So this is marketing that has value, and then it sounds like the way they do their demo, whether you sign up and become a member of their solution or not, you're getting tangible value. You're getting some coaching and you're getting some information on your market. So I love this. Deborah, any question? You've got 10 minutes left. And remember, audience, if you have specific questions, put those in chat. We will get to those. But Deborah, any direction you want to take this? Any question you have? I mean, I've got 1 or 2 more questions, but I want to make sure anything you want to get covered gets covered.
So Mike recently did an interview on his Top of Mind podcast with a gentleman from, I believe it was John Burns Research, talking about demographics, which I found fascinating. And he was talking about how I think it's 13,000. There's 13,000 people turning 35 every day.
Every day.
And there was a period of time where the births were up. Anyways, long story short, Mike, anything that you think would be valuable from that interview on the demographics and knowing the audience is, mortgage professionals who are looking to serve agents and consumers, anything from that conversation and further research that you think we should all know and be equipped with when preparing and nurturing for, business in the future, and then also, for this fourth quarter?
Yeah. So the good news demographically for the country is that we have good news for us in the housing industry, is that, we have a big population of people um, who are in the prime home buying years. That's not falling anytime soon. We have
Demand is high. Demand is high.
Demand is high, and it's not falling anytime soon. Now, maybe in 30 years or 25 years it shifts, but as of right now, like demographically, that is high. One of the things I learned from Eric on that was the migration pattern, the fact that, one of the things that's happened in the last 2 years is that we've slowed changing metros, like moving from Chicago to Dallas or from, New York to Florida. Those patterns have slowed way down, and they've slowed way down. In fact, like Austin had actually negative outbound migration in the last year. So it's a temporary thing, and it's a temporary thing. And it's the same reason, like we're not changing jobs, and the same reason we're not buying a house. Like it's more expensive. We got a good thing. Companies they're not doing a lot of layoffs, and so unemployment is very low, but also they're not doing a lot of hiring. So, so it's like, we're not quitting our jobs because we're afraid of, it's much more scary to quit my job in the Midwest and move to Arizona right now because I'm not sure about hiring when I get there. So we have this great stay going on, and it's really a function of the last 2 years. And so if we get rates easing down, like we got maybe a head fake, but maybe they ease down to the sixes or the low sixes or into the fives next year. I think you'll see that ease up, and you'll see more people, you'll see more companies that are hiring. You'll see more people go like, okay, like I've been planning on moving to Dallas or to Austin anyway. Now I can make it happen. I've been waiting for 2 years. Those kind of things. I think you'll see that loosen up in the next year. And that will give us a little bit of growth in the total number of transactions. Welcome to the top of.
All right. Love that. Deborah, is that everything you want to make sure we covered?
Yeah, I was fascinated with how many people are coming into the market and how much demand just between potential immigration and just the younger population who's right at that prime age with higher income earnings and, starting to get married and wanting to enter into home ownership, that we've really got to do a great job nurturing and creating content that brings awareness for these individuals. And I think a lot of times we think, oh, first-time home buyer, it's been tough for them because, they didn't have money for a down payment, or, they couldn't even save because the rents were so high. But there's like a wave coming, I believe, based off that interview, that we should all be incubating and creating strategies for right now to launch.
Yeah, like there's no shortage on the demand side, and there is a shortage on the supply side. We have been underbuilding as a country, so like those dynamics. So that implies that like we get in a mode where rates ease down and demand picks up faster than supply. That implies that upward pressure on prices.
Mhm.
And which is, we have an affordability challenge in the country, but the supply demand metrics are such that it doesn't look like that eases anytime soon.
All right.
Maybe it gets worse.
I got a few thoughts and then another homework assignment, and then I'm gonna hand it to Todd for closing thoughts. And so here's my thought. So, I mean, as a guide for the Modern Mortgage Summit, Todd, myself, Shayla Gifford, Jeremy Forcier, about a dozen top 1% mortgage advisors, producing managers, our guides. It's never been more important to be a modern mortgage advisor. And when I think of your data, Mike, in the briefing you gave, first of all, mindset, you've got to be data-driven mindset to even dig into this. I think of leadership, like modern leaders they're not letting the news tell the news to their realtors and their consumers. They're telling the news to their consumers in a highly localized, personalized way. So this type of data, local data, fits into leadership. Technology, obviously, you've got to have a platform and use technology in order to do it. It's advice. You're helping people make more informed decisions. I think modern selling is using data. It's and localizing it, telling those stories, building a personal brand. So I mean, I really think almost everything that you covered aligns with that. So I put a link for anyone who has not taken the assessment. You can either go to Modern Mortgage IQ, take the assessment, click on this. It's a free assessment. Or you could join the community if you haven't already joined the community of mortgage advisors that want to modernize, that want to upgrade so that they can be as valuable as possible for the families they serve, be as valuable as possible for realtors in local markets, builders. Todd, any closing thoughts you have? Anything you want to ask Mike before we go into wrap up mode?
Well, I mean, certainly closing thought is if you haven't taken the assessment, take the assessment. It's pretty valuable to learn where you may have a blind spot, right? We all have things that we know we're good at, but oftentimes we don't know what we're not good at and what we're struggling with. And so kind of as I think, Mike, of, kind of final thoughts, I mean, how would you encourage the person who hasn't spent time to really become an expert on the data to start?
I think the first thing to realize is that a lot of people have a hurdle with the data. Like it can be scary, oh, what are the charts are, what are they saying? And one of the things that the nice things is that you can say to a buyer seller, you can say that, are you a big geek or a little geek? And if they're a big geek, you can hand them the report and you don't have to do any work at all. Right? They go, oh, Mike, I've been reading this report every week. I'm watching the price reductions tick up. Like if they're a big geek, you don't have to do that work at all. So if you're just a little geek, right, you can pick out one. I like to watch this one number. I'm interested. I'm in Austin and I want to track inventory every week because that's what's moving the number right now. Or, we're in Denver. Denver has more inventory than it has in 5 years. Is that going to change for next year? Are we peaked for the season? So we could just watch, one little thing and then you can have that top of mind for the how's the market question. You have a way to answer. And, inventory's up in Denver, but we're past the peak. And you don't have to dive in. You don't have to be a super geek. You don't have to fear the data. That's, I think, the right way to think about it. And then, that ebook has a bunch of other questions and scripts and things that if you want to dive into and level up, you can use that along the way.
You're on mute, Dave.
By the way, I saw Shant Benoshian a couple of weeks ago at the IMB Summit in Texas, and this is his favorite new thing. Like he is nerding out on this. And, if you're not following Shant on Instagram and social media, seeing how the #1 loan officer in America is bringing leadership to his local market, follow him. He's killing it. And this is one of his superpowers. Just saying, just giving you guys.
John and I had a great conversation. John and I had a great conversation there at that Housing Wire Summit. We talked about how to use the price range segments. The high end of the market may be behaving very differently from the low end. And just like that line, just saying that line, people go, oh, they understand it along the way. And so that's a script that you can use with those reports, here, let me show you. The high end of the market may be behaving differently from the low end. And when you say that, it's very intuitive for people. And so then we can dive in. And so he and I were having that conversation.
Love it. So just reminder as we wrap up, the Trust Engine 10X page is actually getting updated next week. But if you want to see, like I'm interviewing top mortgage professionals every Tuesday at 9. We're doing this mastermind. So at least 2 to 3 new videos are going to the YouTube channel. And what I think are the 3, well, not just me, myself, and our training team, what we think are the most valuable interviews to watch to train, whether you want to train yourself or whether you want to train a manager on Mortgage Coach. It's right here. Everything you need to learn how to use Mortgage Coach. If you have not taken this assessment, take this assessment. This community is amazing. Make sure you check it out. You can still get a $500 discount. The first 100 members save $500. So not too late to check it out. Well, my man, Mike, I really appreciate you leaning into this community. Would love to have you here again. Maybe kicking off the new year, either in January or February. We'll invite you back if you're game.
Yeah.
And thank you for being just such a great resource and all the wisdom that you shared today.
You're welcome,
valuable.
Dave. Great to see everybody. I'm glad we can be a help.
All right. This is a wrap, everybody. Take care. Have an
See ya.
awesome weekend. Go Broncos. See all my Denver friends soon.